Today is the National Day of Prayer, which first came to be in 1952 with a joint resolution by Congress and a signature by President Harry S. Truman. It was codified in 1988 by President Ronald Reagan, permanently setting aside the first Thursday of May as the National Day of Prayer. But there were broad calls for prayer across this country even before it was a country. The Second Continental Congress asked the colonies to pray for wisdom in forming a nation back in 1775. A year later, Congress set aside May 17, 1776, as a day of humiliation, fasting, and prayer throughout the colonies. That was reiterated by President Lincoln in 1863. And according to the National Day of Prayer website, this day enables us to recall and to teach the way in which our founding fathers sought the wisdom of God when faced with critical decisions. But what if you don't believe in God? Well, then I guess this day isn't really for you. But what if you're religious, but your religion doesn't exactly involve a God, which is what we found today at the Idaho State House.
Their own, they did not submit to God's righteousness. Christ is the end of the law, so that there may be righteousness for everyone who believes.
In the Lord, dear friends.
While the sound of supplication seemed
In the Lord always.
sparse on the steps of the state capitol on this National Day of Prayer,
how's everyone doing today?
it was certainly sufficient on the inside,
Ready to hail some Satan?
where the second floor rotunda
We thank you, Lord. We worship you, Lord.
was a
Hail Lilith! Hail Satan!
round robin of religion.
I give you glory, Father God.
I normally host a Bible study at my home on 10, and we decided that it would be a good idea, since the National Day of Prayer, to just come down and pray around the Capitol in the rotunda. We had no idea what we were walking into.
Take care never
What they walked into
backs to fit one's own beliefs.
was the Satanic Temple Idaho.
Hail Satan.
Hail Satan.
We are a non-theistic, non-supernatural religion.
That which will not bend must break!
Participating in prayer
In the name of Lucifer,
in their own
we
way.
anoint you in the ashes of the false Messiah's word.
What'd you think?
It was disturbing to me because it was in a public building, but then at the same time, the Christians were here too.
The Lord is with thee!
A face-off of freedoms
This is approved thy womb, Jesus!
I'm here to protect our capital from evil. There's a lot of demons around.
Let us stand now!
of almost biblical proportions.
You got some nice background music going?
Almost.
We don't believe in a literal Satan. It's just the metaphor of Satan. It's sort of like a comic book character that we really like. You know what I mean? Like, think of Paradise Lost, where Satan is the hero against a tyrannical god. Just as they have their interpretation of the Bible in many different ways, we have our different interpretation of a major character.
Like when people hear Satanists, they think sacrifices, they think blood and gore, they think real evil stuff.
Yeah, so while we definitely embrace darker imagery, and I mean, certainly some of us are fans of horror and gore, some of us aren't. Like, I'm wearing, lavender. I like to, jazz it up a little bit, be colorful. We definitely are not about sacrificing. In fact, a lot of our membership is vegan, because that's how much they believe in not harming living creatures.
It's a religion, right?
It's a religion. These are our deeply held religious beliefs. Compassion, wisdom, and justice. That's why we're here, to stand up for what we believe. Satanists, we don't pray to a higher power. However, our interpretation of prayer is that we're kind of symbolically and verbally expressing our hopes and desires to the people of Idaho. That freedom of religion applies in Idaho.
They do have their right to be here, so I do respect that, but I'm not going to allow demons to be around.
every curse, every incantation.
Greetings to my fellow members from the Satanic Temple. Hail Satan. Thank you for inviting me to participate in this National Day of Prayer. And to the state of Idaho, look what you've done, inviting prayer into your secular halls. To be fair, I am an atheist activist who doesn't believe in gods or devils, and neither does the Satanic Temple. But in the spirit of this day, here we go. Let's all bow our heads, whether we agree to or not, and join in the verse of the Satanic Prayer. Hear our Satan prayer.
Hear our Satan prayer.
Our anti-Nicene Creed. Hear our Satan prayer.
Hear our Satan prayer.
For the coming of seed.
For the coming of seed.
Hear our Satan prayer.
Hear our Satan prayer.
Unholy Ghost, Overlord and Taker of life.
Unholy Ghost, Overlord and Taker of life.
Now, how did that feel to the folks who are not Satanists? Most of the Christians here think nothing of hijacking our public halls of power with their spoken prayers, even though not everyone participating or even paying the taxes to keep the lights on in government buildings are all Christians. Is that hard for Christians to understand? Do they already know this and disrespect everyone else by forcing others to bow to their God? The founding fathers of this nation weren't all Christian either. Two of the ones most people named, George Washington and Benjamin Franklin, were also Freemasons. Freemasons do not consider themselves a religion, although they did adopt what look like religious symbols. They weren't Satanists either, but that didn't stop the Catholic Church from persecuting them. Back in 1983, when Pope John Paul II decreed that Catholics enrolled in Masonic associations are involved in serious sin and may not approach Holy Communion. Even in the present, there was serious talk of denying our devoutly Catholic President, Joe Biden, Holy Communion over his support of women's reproductive rights. No religion should have the threat of disfellowship hanging over the heads of our leaders. Which brings me to the point of keeping our government secular. Because once you open the door to religion and government, religious sects, even Baptists and Catholics, fight over who will rule over us. I came here from Texas, where they like to believe in a fantasy they call American exceptionalism, where they pretend as if the U.S. was a Christian country, even though the Founding Fathers explicitly said otherwise. Even our textbooks tell the lie that our system of government was based on a covenant between God and Moses, even though historians say that's not the case at all and that Moses never existed anyway. On the contrary, the Founding Fathers saw what happened to Protestants versus Catholics in England and Catholics versus Protestants in France. Christian against Christian violence, intolerance drove the Pilgrims here, and then it became Puritans versus Quakers. Bloody, divisive conflicts always, culminating in the Salem witch trials. That taught our founders a lesson. Not just that claims of the supernatural cannot be taken in rule at court, but also could not be taken seriously by government, but that every time religion has had rule over law, the result has always been a violation of human rights. And the early history of American settlers is rife with horrific incidents of violent interreligious bigotry, including the horrible reality behind the fable of the first Thanksgiving. Don't you believe it? The founders wanted a country that was better than that, better than anything in Europe or anywhere else in the world, a haven that offered something no other country in history ever had: freedom. Most importantly, the freedom to think and to believe whatever you do for whatever reason makes sense to you, and the freedom to speak your mind without fear of incarceration or execution for expressing prohibited opinions or professing beliefs that elsewhere would be forbidden by law. Americans now can scarcely imagine what it was like to be kept suppressed like everyone else always had been until that time. The founders were mere fallible men, but they were also world travelers and well-read. They knew that in most countries there is one religion declared by the state, and everyone who believes differently is forced to revere and show deference to the state religion. Yazidis in Yemen, Jews in Iran, Sikhs in India, Zoroastrians in Arabia, and Christians in Sharia countries are merely tolerated as second-class citizens with fewer rights than everyone else, and they live or die at the mercy of capricious legislators. Thus, the founders decided that theocrats may oppress our religion in all those other countries, but they can't do it here, not legally. Because in this country, there is no state religion, no requirement to believe or show deference to any faith, because there isn't one faith prioritized over every other one. Congress shall make no law even respecting an establishment of religion, nor prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Instead, as Thomas Jefferson said, we should erect a wall of separation between church and state. He knew firsthand, as they all knew, the disparity and inequity that each of the major religions wrought wherever and whenever they could. So the Founding Fathers devised a system of government that was the antithesis of the one associated with Moses, the very opposite of the theocratic autocracy that Christian nationalists say they want now, that they pretend we always had. Instead, the founders followed Democritus, not Moses, nor Jesus. You don't have to believe in any faith. Here, all are equal. None have privilege over another, and that includes those like myself who have no faith at all. Thus, the United States was the first ever secular government, the first to admit that laws were written by men, not gods, the first nation that was not devoted to one god or another, but a government of, by, and for the people, with only a vague reference to whoever or whatever they might imagine their creator to be. Because this was some time before Darwin, a century before science explained biodiversity. So many of the founders were deists, about as close to atheist as one could get back then. Some of them were Christian, although they were often the Unitarian sort, who denied the divinity of Jesus. But even if there was a majority of Christians, that does not make a Christian country. In fact, John Adams, America's second president, identified as Christian himself when he publicly stated, as president, that the United States is not in any sense founded on the Christian religion, in a statement that was ratified by Congress unanimously. How far we have fallen since then. Way back then, some of the founders wanted to emancipate slaves right from the beginning, because how can you say that everyone has equal right to life and liberty and all of that when you've got slaves? But the South wouldn't let us do that, and we couldn't form a country without them. So you see where the problem starts and still is now. The Christian God failed to secure the rights of slaves and left that up to human magistrates, as always. Christians say that the Puritans came here to escape religious persecution because Christians love to pretend like they're being persecuted. Look at them. They point to other places and times where they were, and we agree, historically denied the right to believe and to speak as they will according to their conscience. But that proves that rights are given by humans, not by God. For another example, last year, American women had the right to bodily autonomy to govern their own reproduction. Next year, they may be denied that. It wasn't God who gave them that right, and it's not God trying to take it away from them. Remember, Christians, the book of Numbers chapter 5 says that a husband can force his wife to have an abortion if he suspects that she cheated on him. God does not protect our Constitution. Instead, as Orwell illustrated in his Animal Farm, in a land where we are all equal, mob rule has found a way for some to become more equal than others. The American ideal of free thought has been weakened bit by continuous attacks by the conservative right, now known as Christian nationalism. It began with a series of rural revivals, reviling the founders for their alleged godlessness, and then the believers got into government themselves to erode it from within. That's how we got the Pledge of Allegiance. Originally, the founders were against pledges, saying that's a Christian thing. But Christian politicians later forced it on us anyway. The first version of the pledge said, "One nation, indivisible." Then in 1954, it was changed to "One nation under God." And thus we were no longer indivisible. We had been divided by those who declare themselves to be patriots, but actually seek to undermine all that America once stood for. Those who demand liberty, but really want to deny that to everyone else. What they mean by liberty is they want to do whatever the hell they want without having any accountability to anyone. The original motto of this country was E pluribus unum, out of many, one. That motto showed that you could have English parents, Irish parents, Italian parents, Vietnamese parents, that it didn't matter where you or your family came from, you could still become an American. We were all one. But in 1957, our motto was changed to In God We Trust. And according to this new, divisive motto, I am no longer a real American, even though my family came over on the Mayflower. So the idea of a national day of prayer is un-American. You're welcome to make believe in whatever fairy tale appeals to you. You can talk to your magic imaginary friend anywhere you like, anytime you like. But those of us who are not pretenders are still Americans too. Christian nationalists will not accept that. They don't believe in the values of freedom or equality that this nation was based on. They want an authoritarian autocracy instead. They want absolute power over you, Christians. Are you hearing me? I'm talking to you. And they have deceived you. They have deceived you and are manipulating you to achieve that for them. Christian nationalists are not patriots because they don't follow the Constitution, and they don't follow Jesus either. Remember, Jesus said you should pay your taxes and renounce your wealth. He said a rich man cannot get into heaven. Jesus, your God, was a first century equivalent of a socialist who said that you should give up your wealth specifically to feed the poor and to give aid to immigrants. How far Christians have fallen from your Christ. You left your leftist Jesus. Thomas Jefferson said that it does me no injury for my neighbor to say that there are 20 gods or no God. It neither picks my pocket nor break my leg. He understood tolerance. And Jesus said, turn the other cheek. But you modern, militant, conservative Christians are so unlike your Christ. It's not just that you believe absolute nonsense with no truth to it, but worse than that, you're against evolution, secularism, leftism, socialism, and you don't know why, because you don't know what any of those words mean. You were just told to hate it, and so you're against it. Because you bought into a system that is against education, against science, because your preachers don't want you to understand anything, because a lack of understanding leads to fear and hate, and that's what your leaders want. They want you to be irrational reactionaries, fearful even of progress. You bought into a system of tribalism that is based on hate, hatred of the other ethnicities, other cultures, other opinions, and what you call races, and anything that doesn't fit into your binary perspective. Because you've been conditioned to think in terms of black or white, left or right or wrong, male or female, Democrat or Republican, as if the GOP are all right-wing conservatives and every Democrat is a cannibalistic, communistic, baby-eating, devil-worshipping pedophile. That obviously can't be true, of course. But even when your preachers tell you something that dumb, that impossibly ridiculous, you still believe it blindly because you're not using your right to think. You react to unbelievers the way you've been conditioned to react. Your propaganda machine pretends that you have the moral high ground to get you fired up, and they let you keep your guns so that you'll feel safe and you'll feel powerful. As long as you have your Second Amendment, you won't even notice that they're taking away all your rights in the First Amendment. Every provision thereof, and they're using you to do it. You're being manipulated as minions against your own interests to undermine your own rights to think and believe and speak freely. That's why we are here today, to open your mind and help you out of your delusion. Hail Satan! Hail Satan! Thank you.